Hello YouTube, Muckluck here, and we are back continuing our tour through trying out all of the Boon DPS supports. And today we are trying the Alacrity Providing DPS Power WILLBENDER. Long name, they should shorten that. And this is our Guardian right here. The build I used to try to learn the basics of the basics was this WILLBENDER DPS build found on Guild Gen's website. Went through this, it was mostly Berserker and Assassin. I did slightly change that, I'll come back to that. Runes of Infiltration, Relic of the Brawler, Great Sword, Sword Focus with Force and Accuracy on both weapons. I just used a cake here, and the build, I'm just gonna show it in the game so the window's a little bit larger. This is the build that we used for this. There is different WILLBENDER builds on the various guide websites that you can find, but that is the one that I chose to use for this experiment. I actually need to change this back. I was using Wall of Reflection for Bone Skinner earlier. So, how does this thing work? As always, any one of these Boon DPS builds, their role can be divided into two different things. So one thing is keeping up the boons, and the other thing is doing as much damage as possible with their leftover power. Now, the way that WILLBENDER provides its primary boon, Alacrity, is as follows. After you use their F2, which is a dash in a line, it does not stop when you hit an enemy. It leaves blue flames on the ground and farts out a bunch of short boons. After you use the F2, every 5 hits that you do gives like 1 second of alacrity to your party. So you activate the F2 and then you use lots of moves that do a large number of blows. For example, Purging Flames does 6 hits, Sword of Justice does 4, Symbol of Resolution does 5 hits, Whirling Wrath does 7 hits, Ray of Judgment does 9 hits, Symbol of Blades does 5, Zealot's Defense does 8. So just to show you really quickly here, just a quick example of just keeping up alacrity, I'm just going to like dash, do this, do this, do this, do this, and then just do as many blows as possible. And we've got 13 seconds of alacrity right now. That's not a lot, but that is, it's enough to keep it up as long as you can keep meleeing. So now what I'm gonna do is remove this stuff and respawn it. So once again, the priority is use the F2, and you can use it twice at the beginning of the fight, but then after that, every time F2 comes up, you wanna use it and use as many moves as you have that have a lot of number of hits. So that is on your sword focus, the 2, the 3, and the 4 do a large number of hits. On the Great Sword, the 4 and then the 2 while standing in the 4 does a large number of hits. And if you're inside the hitbox, if I move over here, you see this fires projectiles in all directions? If you're standing inside the target's circle, they all hit the target. So it's much more impressive, so that's more blows. So that's how you keep the boon up. And there's pros and cons to that. That's really easy to do if you can melee, but if you cannot melee an enemy, if you're having to run around for a second, you're not providing buffs. If there's a phase and the boss turns invulnerable and starts telling Mr. Bond how he's going to do his evil plan while sharks with lasers come into the room, you're not providing buffs. You can only provide the boons while you are bonking things, okay? That's it. Now the rest of the time, you're using most of the skills on the Greatsword bar. You're using the other functions, F1, F3 skills as well, and most of the skills on the sword focus bar, although you could save the 5 for when you need to block. The 5 is blocks. You could save that, and those are your damage sources. Now the F3 is interesting. The F3 gives Aegis and stability, but just like the F2, it gives more based on the number of hits you do while it's active. So if I F3 into this and then do a large number of blows, we've got 7 stacks of stability, and we've got 1 minute and 20 seconds of Aegis. Now Aegis, of course, goes away when you take a single hit. And I was considering saving the F3 for only when I needed stability, just to avoid getting like knocked down and stuff. However, we do have a trait that increases all our damage by 7% as long as we have Aegis on us. So because of that trait, we just ended up using F3 whenever it lights up in the rotation as well to keep, because eventually unavoidable hits come and take away your Aegis. And then by using F3 as often as possible, you get it back up, and then you get that 7% damage buff back. Plus, occasional blocks are nice too. So that's the rotation, that's how to play it. Just to show the full thing as an example right now, pretend I'm attacking this for the first time. So I'm just going to do, and then do this, and then do this, and then do this, and then do this, and then I'm gonna weapon swap and do the other one, and do that, and do that, and do that, and that. I can't even really narrate what I'm doing, but I can show you. All right, and that's the gist of it. So as you can see right now, I'm doing actually 24K. That's a new high for me. Woo! So most of my tests, I was honestly doing 21 to 22K on the dummy, but we're doing 24 right now. In the actual fights, when you're having to like run around and stuff like that, you have very little ranged damage with this exact version of the build. There are other versions, but I'm talking about this one right now. The sword focus, the 3, is a little bit of range, and the 4 summons a laser beam on the target, which does some hits. Additionally, if you throw the spinny sword or you throw the flames, these 2 skills down here, those are range, but a majority of your damage is melee. So that is how that works, and my thoughts on how this build plays. Very high APM. As you are wailing on things, you reduce the cooldown of your weapon skills. So your weapon skills light back up very, very rapidly. There is never a moment in time, it feels like, where you have nothing to hit. You are constantly pressing buttons. Some people may love that. Some people may not. That is a thing. Next up, pretty easy to gear. Now, the build guide says you can run this with like full Berserker and maybe swap 2 pieces out for Assassin's gear. With my terrible skill level, I could not keep Alacrity up. When I kept beating on the dummy and trying out the rotation, and I could not keep Alacrity up. One person in chat suggested, why don't you swap out like 2 pieces for concentration gear? So I swapped out 2 pieces, these 2 here, for Diviners, and the rest is Berserker, and then it all clicked and I was able to do it. So for me, I did 2-piece Diviner, and the rest was Berserker, and I was able to keep the boons up. So not too bad to gear this build. As I mentioned, it's mostly melee with very little ranged options. So anytime that you have to run out, like you get a red circle, you got to run it away, or the boss is doing a big hit and you got to back away for that, your damage drops very low during that time period. That is just a thing of this build. If you have to split up from your group mates, now your F2 is what allows you to provide Alacrity for the next 6 seconds. So you activate this, and then for 6 seconds, you can provide Alacrity. It does stack. So you can, at the beginning of the fight, because you've got 2 charges of it, you can just F2, F2, and then for 12 seconds, you're providing Alacrity. After that, you pretty much need to hit it every time it lights up. But let's say it lights up and your group is spread out all over the room. You could just save it. You know, the people are spread out anyway. You're not going to hit them. And then, you know, it eventually, even the second charge comes back up. This happened to us in Cosmic Observatory. Dagda pushed everyone out. We were separated. I just let the charges recharge. And as soon as we all were able to group back up, I just double did it and then was able to provide a lot of Alacrity on everybody again. So your tools that provide boons, you can save them up for the next time the group, you know, gets back together in order to provide that. You know, if you were playing this build, do not just mash this every time it lights up if the people aren't in range. Get them in range first. Another thing, on one of the things, I really screwed up on Freynier. We were doing Freynier at the beginning of the fight. I did like dash, and then the F1, and I was like, okay, time to start applying boons, and then he knocked me across the room. And I didn't have a stun break in this build, so I ate the full stun, and by the time I got back, the DPS had phased him, and then he went invulnerable, and my F2 wore off. So my ability to give Alacrity was gone, and we did not have Alacrity. So my group suffered greatly on that fight, because I was never able to get the Alacrity back up time before the end of the fight. So that was terrible by me. After that, I started opening with like crashing courage so that I started with stability so that I did not have that happen again. Not saying that's the best opener, but I did that as a precaution because of the stupid thing I had done before. But yeah, if you get CC'd or interrupted or the boss goes invulnerable during your double flowing resolve and you cannot do the large number of blows you need to do during the flowing resolve, it really sucks. It is awful for like the next 10 minutes trying to come back from that and keep Alac on your party when you can't get that buffer going at the beginning. So that's the thing. In general, I feel that the F2 feels bad. And I want to show you guys a few things here. So if I respawn a golem. All right, so first off, this is the F1. It goes forward and does a punch. But if you're at a boss and you hit F1, it just does the hit, okay? This is the F2, okay? If you've got a boss targeted, this is the F2. You still go through it, all right? Very annoying. So I might do like, you know, F2 and then use Greatsword 3 to turn back around, and then you gotta fix your position, okay? You constantly have to slightly fix your positioning because the F2 will take you away. And you want to do it through the enemy so that the blue flames are hitting them, because that's a more number of blows. Now, the F1 can fix your position, this Greatsword 3 can fix your position, the F3 can fix your position, and the Sword 2 can fix your position. So I started, whenever possible, I would use the F2 and then use one of those other moves right after to try to correct myself. But it's like the F2 is constantly trying to sabotage where you're standing, and the other skills are constantly fighting it to fix where you're standing. And it felt dumb. The F2 was the only movement skill in the arsenal that felt bad. I'm forced to use it to provide the essential boon, and then it takes me out of melee range sometimes, depending on the size of the hitbox. So that's the thing, I didn't really like that. The rest of the kit, it didn't feel bad. This build is very low hit points. Guardians, for those who don't know, have some of the lowest hit points in the game, but that's offset by the fact that they have some of the highest amount of active defense, such as Aegis, which blocks a guaranteed hit. So it's a very active defensive character, not a passively defensive character. One thing, Litany of Wrath in the build, and now you can use any heal skill you want, but the build recommended using Litany of Wrath. Litany of Wrath is a very small self-heal, and what it does is you hit it, and it just does a little heal, 1600, but then you get 33% life stealing for 6 seconds. If you can attack, that's massive. If you can't attack, this skill sucks, right? It's just a 1600 heal. So there was in Old Lion's Court, there was one point that the green robot was doing the vacuum. We're all moving away. I cannot attack it right now. My health gets really low because the healers in that moment were struggling. I use my self heal and I'm like, ding. It was I gained a pixel of health and then died. It was awful. I considered, for some of the fights, this is awful. And now you could change the heal. For any fight where you can actively wail on the guy, right? Bone Skinner, except for when he's jumping away or something. This was great, because I turned this on and I was just keeping myself full health anytime the healers were struggling. But on a lot of other encounters, this was man, I wish I had brought a different heal. This feels bad. So in those, I would recommend any of the other heals for that. And lastly, I've already said this once, but if you can't melee, you can't do much. You do have some range damage. However, if the group's not in melee, they're not getting the boons. You gotta be in melee. You need to just draw the little thing onto the boss, and then you got to just do a huge number of hits right on him. You can't keep yourself alive if you're using this heal if you can't wail on things. You can't keep alacrity on your group if you can't wail on things. You cannot do most of your damage if you cannot melee wail on things. And none of that's really that bad, but it's worth saying. That's all. It's just worth saying. Let's talk about utility. Guardian, as I've mentioned in other videos, Guardian has some of the best utility, the best tools in their toolbox of any class. If we look in here, we've got raw damage. We've got one of the biggest CC buttons in the game. We have got, where is Stand Your Ground? Stand Your Ground gives a stun break and stability to your whole group. You've got Wall of Reflection. I use this on Bone Skinner every 20 seconds. 8 seconds of take your bullets back, you dropped these, So, I mean, this is great. You've also got, Sanctuary, if you just need the full bubble, but also Sanctuary, as mentioned, is a massive CC because it does knockbacks constantly. There's a lot in here. There's a lot of really cool stuff in here. There's revive tools. There's movement skills. They've got a lot. But all of this is an option for when you need it. What I was doing on most fights was Sword of Justice and Purging Flames, just spam them off cooldown for damage. They also did a more than one for number of blows, which helped proc these things and keep the buffs up, and Bane Signet just for power. Talking about these, you notice there's a lot of boons on that tooltip. Realistically, my first time playing this, I was keeping Alacrity up on my party, unless we had to run all over the place, but I wasn't keeping all those other boons on the party. Those other boons were just kind of there for a while, and then they'd fall off, and then there for a while, and they fall off. So I think it was more accurate to say that this build keeps up Alac, but the other stuff, it helps a bit, it throws a little bit of uptime on a lot of other boons, which can, combine with what the healer's doing to reach 100% uptime. But I don't think it's going to just give the whole group regen, resolution, swiftness, alacrity, and vigor 100% of the time, as well as swiftness and might from this thing. It's providing some, but it's not giving everybody all that stuff all the time. And again, Crashing Courage is awesome. I chose to just do it a lot because of the Aegis is giving you a damage buff. You could, if you save this for the, again, if you do this and then do a large number of hits right after, you get many stacks of Aegis instability on you, which is really cool. And it felt good to use that. I've talked about the heal, I've talked about the utility. The elite skill, Heaven's Palm. Heaven's Palm, it got reworked a while back in PvP, and I have suffered from it greatly in PvP since then. However, this is my first time trying it out in a PvE situation. Heaven's Palm is a 550 Defiance bar break that you're evading while you do it. And for those that don't know, the Moa Signet, very famous for its massive CC, is 600. This is 550 and a 20-second cooldown. Moa Signet is at like a minute cooldown. This is a 20-second cooldown, massive hit that does 550 break bar damage. That is extremely impressive, and it made my brain make the happy juice. Like, if I do this, like see that it was... Like, you're not even taking a massive break from doing damage by firing this. Like, your damage will go down a little, but it's not like you stop DPS to interrupt. You're still doing damage by doing that. And it's almost cooled down again. So Heaven's Palm was fun. As far as CC in the build, now you could add more, but just in the build that we were running, Heaven's Palm was basically always available. Also, if you land Binding Blade, it flips over to a pull, which you could use, and that was another CC. And there was another one. Hang on just a second. No, I thought I had another one. I may just, it might be here and I'm just not seeing it. Additionally, as mentioned, you can swap out a utility for the bubble, which does like 5 to 7 knockbacks depending on your build on an enemy, and that is a ton of CC as well. Very popular in Fractals. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say about the WILLBENDER. Oh yeah, the Signet. Thank you for the reminder. Yeah, Signet does 300 CC. However, you know, in all of the stuff that we did today, there was never a time where I did Heaven's Palm and then the thing wasn't interrupted. Because like the whole group, the group I was in was pretty good. They did a lot of CC. I did Heaven's Palm, it was over. And then in Icebird Saga Strikes, I did Heaven's Palm and then the Beam, the special action key, and it was over. So I never got to a point where I actually used the Bane Signet for that stuff. But yeah, that's it. I would say this class is not too bad to learn as long as you know that okay, I hit Flowing Resolve, then hit the buttons that do lots of hits. Okay, next weapon. Hit Flowing Resolve, hit the buttons that do lots of hits. And that's most of it. Like, if you're doing the Alacrity rotation, there's not much left in the DPS rotation to learn. There's a lot of overlap between the two. In a perfect situation, again, I was doing like 22k DPS. I did 24 during my example earlier. That's an outlier, if I'm honest. And do I recommend this? Yeah, it's fine. It's fine if you don't mind being a melee Unga Bunga character and a little on the fragile side. You need to play decently. Like, there's not a lot of cushion for you making massive mistakes. You don't have the massive health pool of the Necro or the second HP bar of a Reaper or the constant barrier spam of a Scrapper or anything like that. So you have to actively be avoiding the incoming no-no stuff or using your Aegis. But if you can handle that and you don't mind getting Berserker, maybe a few pieces of Diviners, you'd be all right. And that's how I feel about WILLBENDER. See you in the next one.